All right. Recording has begun. So we're in chapter 9, right? I think it's 9, verse 13. We're talking about the different children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Noah. We're going through all the different people that founded important nations, all the 70 nations of the world. So far we've gone through the sons. There were 3 sons of Noah. There was Shem, Ham, and Yefes. We've gone through Yefes and one of Ham's children and his descendants. Now we're going to go to the rest of the children of Ham. So his first son was Cush, who was the father of Nimrod, which we talked about last week. So now we're going to get into the second son, which is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is Egypt. So verse 13 says, Umitzrayim, the second son, Mitzrayim, Yolad, fathered, Es Ludim ve'es Anamim ve'es Lohavim ve'es Naftuchim, 4 sons of Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim is the ancestor of the Egyptians, and the 4 sons of Mitzrayim are Ludim, Anamim, Lohavim, Naftuchim. So we're familiar with the name Mitzrayim. This is chapter 9, verse 13. We're familiar with the name Mitzrayim. That's the ancestor of Egypt. And we refer to Egypt as Mitzrayim. And then these 4 sons, many of them are also familiar. If you've studied through Tanakh, these names come up. These are names of different regions in Egypt, which were all named after their ancestors, the sons of the original Mitzrayim. So we have, for example, Lud is a region in Egypt. Chapter 10.
Page 46.
Is it chapter 9 or 10?
It's
10, I'm sorry. Yeah, chapter 10, verse 13. So Mitzrayim is Egypt, the ancestor of Egypt. And then these 4 sons, and the sons mentioned in the next verse, are all different sons of Mitzrayim, but they also, different regions of Egypt were named after them. So if you go through Tanakh, you'll find these names in various places. So for example, Lud is a region in Egypt. In the next verse, we have Pasrusim, which are the ancestors of Pasros. We have Pasros frequently mentioned in Tanakh. The Plishtim, the Philistines, are mentioned frequently. So these names are familiar. These are all children of Mitzrayim, of the original ancestor of Egypt. At the Seder,
That's what it means.
which name?
Mitzrayim.
Mitzrayim, yeah. Yeah, so Mitzrayim is Egypt, and they're all descendants of this original Mitzrayim, who was the son of Ham. And then these children, the children of Mitzrayim, many of them had different regions in Egypt named after them, or maybe families in Egypt. So if you made it all the way to the end of the Seder, which not everybody does, but the end of the first Seder, we sing a song, and the refrain is Vayihi b'chatzi halayla. It happened at midnight. We talk about all the different miracles that happen at midnight, and we talk about the plague of the firstborn. So we mentioned there the way it's worded there is Zera b'chore pasros machatzta. You smote the firstborn of Patros. So Patros is Pasrusim that we have in verse 14. That's one of the sons of Mitzrayim. Now it's interesting, all these names, we have 4 names of the sons of Mitzrayim in verse 13, and then in the next verse we're going to have another 4. We're going to have 8 names in total of the sons of Mitzrayim. and they're all plural. They're all in a plural form. In Hebrew, the yud mem suffix, the im suffix, as in ludim, anomim, naftuchim, lehavim, pasrusim, kasluchim, that's a plural suffix. So all these children were named with plural names, which is interesting. And then Mitzrayim himself, the ayim suffix, is a pair. In Hebrew, you can have a plural word, and you can also have a word that's a pair, that's two things. So for example, the word yad means hand. Yadayim is a pair of hands. Einayim is a pair of eyes. Oznayim is a pair of ears. Anything that comes in pairs gets the ayim suffix. And anything that's plural, more than two, gets the im suffix. So Mitzrayim himself, the father, had a suffix. His name was in the form of a pair of Mitzrayim. And his sons were all in the plural form, which is unusual. It's an unusual form for their names, but that's what their names were. There's actually, in Hebrew, there's many words that only occur in the plural form. And there's many words that only occur in we call the zug form, the pair. So, and there's always a reason for it. I don't necessarily know what the reasons are, but there's always going to be a reason for all these unusual names. So for example, if you look at different nouns, you can have, let me just clarify what I'm talking about. In English, you have a word, you have a noun, it's one thing. If you add an S, it's plural, it's multiple. So chair is one chair. Chairs with an S at the end is multiple chairs. In Hebrew, the suffix im, the yud mem, makes it plural. And if you change the vocalization, you say ayim, that makes it a pair of things. That's the way the language works. And these children of Mitzrayim himself ends with the sound ayim, so that sounds like two of something. And his children all end with im, which is multiple, plural. So in Hebrew, there are other words, there are many nouns which are always in the plural form, even if they're singular. And there's a lot of words that are in the zug form, meaning they have the ayim suffix, which means two, and they're really just one. So for example, the word mayim, which means water, is ayim. That has the ayim suffix, mayim. Sounds like it's talking about two things. Hayim, which means life. Also, ayim. Yerushalayim is Jerusalem. Also has the ayim suffix. And there's always going to be a reason. Everything in Hebrew, this is God's language, so there's always going to be a reason for anything unusual is going to have an explanation. So the three examples I just gave, the fact that it's called mayim, water is referred to as mayim, is because there are two waters. As it says in Bereishis, there's the lower waters and the upper waters. So there's the waters on earth and the waters in heaven. The waters in heaven are more of a spiritual concept, but there's two different waters, and God separated between the two. That's why it's called mayim, the double water. The word chayim, life, is also double, ayim, because we have two lives. We have a life in this world and a life in the next world. Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, is double, because there's the earthly Jerusalem, the city, and then there's the heavenly Jerusalem. There's two. So all these words are in plural form. They do only refer to one thing, but the reason they are given a plural form is because there is a plurality to them. There's a spiritual aspect in addition to the physical aspect. And then there's a lot of words in Hebrew that are in plural form, not pairs, but multiples. For example, the word for face in Hebrew is panim, faces. The word for old age is zikunim, the later years. The word for young age is ni'urim, bichurim, alumim. All of those mean the younger years of a person. So they're always plural. And I don't have a reason for those, but I'm sure there is some kind of reason why all those words are plural. So there are many nouns that are always plural, and there are many nouns that are always formed as pairs, but it's unusual in proper nouns. The idea that a person's name would be given in the plural is unusual. But that's what we're finding here. The name of Mitzrayim, the ancestor of Egypt, had a name that implied that he was a pair, and the names of his children were all in plural form, which is interesting. One explanation that's given, the Ibn Ezra, one of the medieval commentators, one of the Sephardic commentators, his explanation is that these people were not actually named. They didn't actually have these names that are given here. These are names of places primarily. The people, Mitzrayim's children, had other names. Their descendants lived in these places, and they were given names based on the place they came from. So just like we say in English, there's like we say Italians, right? So Italy is a country. Anybody who comes from Italy is Italian. So in Hebrew, you'd say there's a country called Lud, and then anybody that comes from there are called Ludim. And Anamim, Lehavim, Naftuchim, people who come from these locations. And the locations themselves were the locations where Mitzrayim's descendants lived. His children probably had similar names, but the names that are given here are the places where their children lived. That's the Ibn Ezra's explanation. And Rashi seems to agree with him because he doesn't say this, but Rashi seems to agree with that because Rashi refers to these children of Mitzrayim also in the plural. He refers to them in plural terms, which makes him sound like he's not talking about individuals, he's talking about nations. So Mitzrayim, so our verse 13, when it says that Mitzrayim fathered Ludim, Anamim, Lehavim, Naftuchim, it's not saying that he fathered people by these names, it means that he fathered nations. One nation were referred to as Ludim, because they lived in Lud. Another one was referred to Anamim, Lehavim, Naftuchim. So that's the children of Mitzrayim. And then verse 14 adds another two. Ve'es pasrusim, ve'es kasluchim. Another two of Mitzrayim's sons, or the nations that came from him, were the pasrusim and the kasluchim, the people who dwelled in Pasros and Kasluach, or whatever it was called. Two different sons of Mitzrayim. Asher yatzeu misham plishtim, from which sprouted the Plishtim, the Philistines. Ve'es Kaftorim, and also the Kaftorim, were another child of Mitzrayim. So this verse is interesting because it lists two different nations, the Pasrusim and the Kasluchim, and then it says the Plishtim, the Philistines, went out of those two, out of the Pasrusim and the Kasluchim. So Rashi explains, based on a midrash, that the Plishtim actually came from both of these sons of Mitzrayim, because Mitzrayim had these two sons, Pasrusim and Kasluchim, and these were Hamites, these were immoral people, and they swapped wives. So the children of Mitzrayim's sons Nobody knew who was whom, which family they belonged to. So Pasrusim and Kasluchim were both the fathers of the Plishtim, the Philistines. We hear about the Philistines throughout Tanakh. They were always the enemies of the Jewish people. They lived in the western side of the land of Israel, and they were always attacking the Jews or subjugating the Jews. So the Plishtim were descended from both these two different sons of Mitzrayim. They were originally Egyptians. They were descended from two different families of the Egyptians, but these two families were very open marriages, I guess. They were swapping their wives, and the Plishtim came from both of them. It's interesting that this is a theme. All of the enemies of the Jewish people are illegitimate. Always. We have the Moab and Ammon. Those are the two nations that were always attacking the Jewish people. They are descended from Lot, who was with his daughters. Lot and his daughters together had two boys. So that was incest. And then we have the Philistines, who were always attacking the Jewish people. They were descended from two different fathers. Wasn't clear who their father was. And then also Amalek, the classic enemy of the Jewish people who attacked for no reason, with no kind of attempt at territorial gain, or there's no reason to attack. Amalek is also a mamzer. He's an illegitimate child multiple times over. His father and his grandmother were his parents, and then she also was born from her grandfather and someone else. I don't remember exactly the whole story, but he was illegitimate for multiple reasons, Amalek. So the Jewish people have come across many different illegitimate nations who have always been subjugating them. So that's the second child of Ham. Ham had Cush, who was the father of Nimrod. And then there was Mitzrayim, who is the ancestor of Egypt. And we just listed all the different families of the Egyptians. And then there's a third son, was named Phut. He was mentioned earlier. But we don't hear about his children. I mentioned in an earlier class that the 70 nations, some of them are the grandchildren of Noah, and some of them are the great-grandchildren. I mean, the person that they claim as their ancestor. So Phut is the son of Ham, and he's one of his descendants were one of the 70 nations, but it doesn't split up any further. He's just the ancestor, and all his descendants were that nation. Whereas some of the other nations split up further. Mitzrayim was Egypt, but then he also splits up into these 8 different groups. But we don't hear about the children of Phut. But the fourth son was Canaan, and him we're going to hear about a lot. That was the fourth son of Ham. Canaan was the one that Noah cursed because he told his father that he found Noah undressed, and he told his father to go see, and his father went in and laughed about it. So Noah cursed Canaan. And the curse was that Canaan would be a servant. He would be a slave to his uncles, to Shem and Japheth. And all his descendants would be slaves. And one of the ways that Canaan was a slave is that he had his land, which is today the land of Israel. And he spent, but his descendants spent centuries developing that land and perfecting it and making gardens and orchards and houses. And they didn't keep it. They developed this whole land for the Jewish people. So in that sense, Canaan was a slave to the descendants of Shem, because they spent all these centuries developing the land of Israel, which they were developing for themselves, but it ended up being passed on to the Jewish people, who are descended from Shem. So the land of Canaan is the land of Israel, which is promised to Abraham. So now the Torah is going to list the sons of Canaan. The fourth son of Ham was Canaan, and then we're going to list the sons of Canaan. In verse 15, it says, Uchnaan Yolad, Canaan fathered, Es Sidon Bechoro, his oldest son was Sidon, Ve'es Ches, the second son was Ches. And then it lists all the other children. We'll just read these verses all together. Ve'es HaYevusi, Ve'es HaEmori, Ve'es HaGirgashi. It's another three sons. Ve'es HaChivi, Ve'es HaArki, Ve'es HaSini, another three sons. Ve'es HaArvadi, Ve'es HaTzmari, Ve'es HaChamasi. 9 sons. So verse 15 listed 2. The next 3 verses listed another 9. And then it says, Ve'achar nafotzu mishpachos HaKanaani. And afterwards, after all these children were born, the families of the Canaani, of the Canaanites, spread out across the land. Now, because Canaan is the ancestor of the Canaanites, and the land of Canaan was inherited by the Jewish people, we hear the names of these sons frequently throughout the Torah. In the next parsha, in Lech Lecha, it's going to mention 10 sons of Canaan. And those 10 sons, the land of those 10 sons, was going to be given to Abraham's descendants. Now, 3 of those sons mentioned in Lech Lecha, referred to as Keni, Kenizi, and Kadmoni, are going to be given to the Jewish people in the future, after Mashiach comes. But the other 7 were given to the Jewish people as soon as they left Egypt. They left Egypt, they went to the land of Israel, and they inherited the land of Canaan, the 7 sons of Canaan. They're mentioned many times throughout the Torah. They're also mentioned one time in the book of Nehemiah, and that's what made its way into the Siddur, where we list all the 10 sons of Canaan, the 7 sons of Canaan, which were given to the Jewish people. We talk about the Eretz HaKanaani, VaHachiti, VaAmor, VaPriza, VaYevusi, VaHagirgashi, the 7 nations that were given to the Jewish people. Now, these nations, the descendants of Canaan, whose land was going to be given to the Jewish people, they're mentioned, as I said, many times throughout the Torah. And the Torah doesn't seem to pay much attention to the order in which they're listed. I'm sure there's some deep reason for that, why sometimes it's listed in this order and sometimes in that order, but there's no apparent reason, the straightforward reason, reading of the Torah, why they're listed sometimes in one order, sometimes in another, doesn't seem to make a difference. But the Torah frequently lists these people, lists these children of Canaan, and in various different orders. In fact, I once counted it up. There's actually 6 different orders in which they're listed. And to make things a little more confusing, there's 7 nations that are descended from Canaan, and very frequently some of them are missing. So usually the Girgashi are missing. The traditional explanation is that the Girgashi were never conquered by the Jewish people. They ran away. When the Jewish people arrived in Israel, the Girgashi ran away, and their land was left open, but the Jews went and conquered the other 6 nations, but they never conquered the Girgashi because they were gone. There is one location where the Torah only lists 5 out of the 7. There's one location where the Torah only lists 3 out of the 7. And in each place, the various commentators explain why some of them were omitted. But we know for a fact that there are 7. There's 3 that we were not yet given. There's 3 nations that will inherit in the future when Mashiach comes. And then there's 7 more. And the way we know that number 7 is that it's listed in Devarim. And in Devarim, it says 7. It tells us how many they are. And it's easy to remember where it is in Devarim because it's in chapter 7, verse 1. So in Devarim chapter 7, verse 1, it says that it lists the 7 nations, and then it says there are 7 of them. So it's very clear how many there are. But throughout the Torah, there's sometimes where it only lists 5, only lists 3, and very frequently only lists 6. But there's a total of 7, and then there's 3 more, which will, in the future, which are promised to Abraham, but we haven't yet received them.
But they're not mentioned here, are they? Those
Well,
30
that's what we'll get to.
There's 11 in this chart.
That's the problem. We'll get there. So throughout the Torah, that's what we have. We have 3 that we haven't yet gotten, and we have 7 that we did inherit when we entered the land of Israel. And those 10 are the ones listed here as the sons of Canaan. The problem is, as both of you are pointing out, that there's 11 in our verse. There's 11 listed here, and also their names have changed. The names that we're used to, that we say in the Siddur and that we see all throughout the Torah, are not what we see here. 4 of the names here are familiar. We have Ches, which is the Chiti. We have Yevusi, Amori, and Girgashi, and Chivi. That's 5. There's 5 in our verse that we are familiar with. But the other 6 we're not familiar with, and there's too many. There's 11 in our verse instead of 10. So the original, and this is where it starts, right? This is the sons of Canaan as they're listed when they were originally born, and yet throughout the Torah they're given different names. So the Ramban explains that these were the names given here in Parshas Noach are the original names that they were given by their father, Canaan. But the names change. Over the years, the names of the nations that they fathered changed. Either because they moved to certain places with the names that, they were named after the places they lived in, or maybe the children that were mentioned in our verse had children of their own, and the nations that they fathered were named after the second generation ancestors. But however it worked out, the names changed over the generations. So when it talks to Abraham, when Hashem is giving his promise to Abraham and he's telling him, you're going to inherit these nations, he gave the names that were current in Abraham's times. And those names remained current throughout the generations afterwards, because that was the name of those nations. But their original ancestors had different names as listed here. Now, the fact that there are 11 in our verse and 10 in Lech Lecha is also not to be wondered at, because these are 11 individual people. And very possibly, some of them combined into one nation. So there were 10 nations total. They were all descended from 11 different people. So we have the original 11 sons of Canaan with their original names given here. And then out of those 11, 10 nations developed, and they had their 10 names, which were not necessarily the same as the original name of their ancestors. And that's also the reason why there's another interesting thing. When you look throughout the Torah, when we list the 10 or 7 nations of Canaan, there's 7 names that keep getting repeated, and one of them is Canaan. So there's 7 nations, one of them is named Canaan, and they're all sons of Canaan. So how does that make sense? How can Canaan's son be named Canaan? But the answer is that this is something that developed over time. So there were 11 sons of the original Canaan, who was the son of Ham, had 11 sons. And those 11 sons turned into, over the course of generations, turned into 10 different nations. One of those nations referred to itself as Canaan. So maybe one of the sons of the original Canaan, perhaps the Ramban suggests, the first son, Sidon, named his nation Canaan. And maybe many other members of the other nations also joined his nation and called themselves Canaan. So some of the Canaanites referred to themselves just as Canaan, and the rest of them were split into 9 different families. All 10 together were the 10 families of Canaan, 3 of which we will inherit in the future, but the 7 of which we already conquered when the Jews originally entered the land of Israel. So that's how we understand our verse. So just in short, we have the 11 sons of Canaan listed in our 3 verses. Noach told Ham that Canaan would be slaves. So all these 11 children are going to be slaves to Shem. And the way that slavery works out is that their land ends up belonging to Shem. They and their land belongs to Shem. So at a certain time in the future, whenever that's going to be, all these 11 nations, which is really 10 nations, are going to belong to Shem. 3 of them in the future, 7 of them have already happened in the past. And up until that time, when we receive these lands, the Canaanim, the Canaanites, are our servants because they're spending all this time developing their land, and eventually that land went to the Jewish people. Now, because the Jewish people would eventually inherit the land of Canaan, the Torah takes some time to give us the exact boundaries of the land. Now, later on in the Torah, in Maseh, Parshas Maseh, the Torah goes through all the details, all the different, it goes through the entire circle of the boundaries of Canaan and the land that we were going to inherit. Here in Parshas Noach, it just gives us a general description from west to east, where the children of Canaan lived. And that's the land that eventually became the land of Israel. So in verse 19, the Torah says, Vayhi givul ha-Kanaani, the boundary of the Canaanites started from Sidon, from a place called Sidon, Boacha Gerara ad Azah, until you come up to Gerar, and until Azah. 2 different locations. So 3 locations listed. These are the western border of the land of Canaan. And then on the other side, on the eastern side, Boacha Sedoma va'amora va'adma utsoyim ad Lasha, until you come on the eastern side of Israel to Sodom, Amorah, Admah, and Sfoyim, until Lasha. Now, I don't know where Lasha is, but if we look at a map of the land of Israel, Israel is surrounded by water. So on the west side of Israel is the Mediterranean Sea. That's the western border. And on the eastern border of Israel, you have the Kinneres on the northeast. That's the lake, referred to as a sea, Yam Kinneres. And then from there flows the Jordan River down south to the Dead Sea and the southeast. So the Mediterranean on the west and the Jordan River on the east. North of the Jordan River is the Yam Kinneres, and south of the Jordan River is the Dead Sea, Yam HaMelech. Now, in the second half of verse 19, we have the cities that were on the west side of Israel, which are very familiar to us. Sodom, Amorah, Adma, and Tzvoyim. That's Sodom and Gomorrah, which were overturned when they, with all the different sins that they did, which is listed in Vayera, in a later parsha. That's the I'm sorry, I said west. I meant east. The southeast side of the land of Israel is Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom, Amorah, Admah, Tzvoyim. Those were the cities that got overturned when God punished the land of Sodom. And they were located in the area which is now the Dead Sea. According to the Torah, the Dead Sea was originally not dead. It was a very fertile land. It's referred to the area that's now called the Dead Sea was not a sea at all. It was dry land. The Torah refers to it as Emek Hasidim. It was a place with a lot of fields. At some point later, I don't know exactly how this happened, but at some point later, water ended up there. And there was a lot of salt, and it became the Salt Sea, the Yam HaMelach, which is the Dead Sea, because nothing lives there. But it used to be Emek Hasidim. It was a place with a lot of fields. The lands surrounding that area were referred to by the Torah as Kigan Hashem Ke'eretz Mitzrayim. It was a place which was a garden. It was a garden, the garden of God, like the land of Egypt. It was a beautiful area which was fertile and green. That's the area which is now the Dead Sea. But because of the sins of the Sodomites, the land was overturned. It was overrun by sulfur and fire until it became a land which the Torah describes as Lo Sizara v'lo Satzmiach v'lo Ya'aleh bo kol Esav. It's a place which cannot be planted. It doesn't grow anything. No grass grows there. If you ever visit the Dead Sea, it's worth doing. You take a bus from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. As soon as you leave Jerusalem, you're in a desert. And you go down, the Dead Sea is very low. You go down toward the Dead Sea, and you pass by completely barren lands. And the highway cuts into the ground. There's banks above the highway, and there's no soil anywhere in that bank. It's completely, there's no way you can grow anything. That whole area is dead. That was the effect of the sins of the people of Sodom. It used to be a very fertile land. God overturned it, destroyed it. And now, as the Torah itself describes, and it's clearly visible if you go visit, Lo Sizara v'lo Satzmiach. It cannot be planted. It can't grow anything. No grass grows there. It's the Dead Sea because it's dead. There's nothing can grow there. That's an eternal monument to the power of sin.
Never can be changed.
Yeah. This is God's world. When we do what he wants, it works out. When we don't do what he wants, it turns into a Dead Sea. Nevertheless, it is very nice to go swimming in the Dead Sea, and it's healthy, and it's also another reason to go there.
So these Sodom and Amorah, Admah, Tzvoyim, they were also children of the Ham?
Yeah, they were. Oh, these names? I don't know if they were. It sounds like these were just places.
Or just places?
Yeah.
But they were populated by the probably family of the Canaanites.
Right, who were descended from Ham. So that's the second half of the verse. That's the eastern side of the land of Israel. And then the western side of the land of Israel mentions four different locations. Three different locations. Sidon, Gerar, and Azza. Those are three three cities, which are on the western side of the land of Israel. And those are also familiar to us. If you study through Tanakh and you read about the Philistines, the Plishtim, those were their cities. The Philistines lived on the western side of the land of Israel. Even though the Philistines were not Canaanites, they didn't own the land of Israel. They were descendants of Mitzrayim. They were Egyptians, but at some point in history, they moved into the land of Israel and they conquered that western area, and that became theirs. And they had their cities on the western side along the Mediterranean. And throughout the period of Tanakh, throughout the period of the First Temple, we hear about the Philistines. They were always the enemies of the Jews. The Jews never got rid of them fully. Possibly because the Philistines were not Canaanites. We had a mitzvah to get rid of all the Canaanites and inherit their land. But the Philistines were Egyptians, and we had no mitzvah to get rid of them. And we left them there. We never really destroyed them, even though the land that they were on was promised to Abraham. The land that they were on, they had conquered from the Canaanites. So it technically was supposed to go to the Jewish people, but at no point during the First Temple period were the Philistines fully driven out of the land. And it's interesting that it doesn't seem like at any point in history we really ever controlled that little area. The area on the western side of...
At the time of David, Shlomo, it didn't complete.
It doesn't sound like it, no. I mean, they subjugated the Philistines, but it doesn't sound like they actually got rid of them. And even today, I mean, that's where the Palestinians are, on the western side along the Mediterranean. The name Gaza, which is mentioned here, is what Americans refer to as Gaza. The G is a mistake. It's really referred to as Gaza. That's the Hebrew name, Gaza. The G got in there because it was a mispronunciation. But so those are the boundaries of the land of Canaan, which is important because the Jewish people were supposed to inherit that land. So then in verse 20, the Torah concludes the sons of Cham. It says, Ela b'nei Cham, these are the sons of the descendants of Cham. Lemishpechosam lilshonasam, all their families and all their different languages, all the denominations of Hamites. Ba'artzosam begoyehem, in all their lands and all their nations. So we've gone through Yefes and Cham. Now we get to the third son of Noah, second oldest, but the third one listed, in verse 21. U'l'shem yulad gamhu. Shem also had children. Avi kol b'nei Ever. Shem was the father or the ancestor of all the Hebrews, all the sons of Ever. Achi Yefes Hagadol, and he was the brother of Yefes, who was older than him. Yefes was the oldest brother, Shem was his brother. The three sons of Noah in age order are Yefes, Shem, Cham. Yefes was the oldest, Shem was the second, Cham was the youngest. But the Torah never lists them in age order. I mean, here it says that Yefes was the oldest, but generally they're not listed in that order. Generally they're listed as Shem, Cham, and Yefes, because Shem was on a moral level, he was the biggest. He was the greatest. And then the brother after him in age order was Cham. So we always say Shem, and then his younger brother Cham, and then we list Yefes last. But when Noah had his prophecy, and he described the future of his three sons and the nations that would come out of them, he described Shem as the as the one that the Shekhinah would dwell among Shem, or Hashem would dwell in Shem's tents. When Noach gave his prophecy about his 3 sons and how they would develop, Shem is the one that he listed as, God is going to dwell among the people of Shem. So the ultimate goal of humanity is described in Noach's original prophecy as being fulfilled through Shem, not through the other 2. Now, when the Torah goes through the descendants of these 3 sons, it lists Shem last. So when it lists the 3 sons themselves, Shem is first, but when it lists their descendants, it lists Shem last, which is pretty common in the Torah, which is a pretty frequent occurrence, that the Torah discusses in short. It goes through the less important lists of people, and then it spends more time talking about the more important. So, for example, the Torah very quickly goes through the different descendants of Esav and all the kings that ruled over them, and then it spends many chapters talking about Yaakov and his children. So here also, the Torah very quickly describes the sons of Yefes and Ham, and then it's going to spend the rest of the Torah talking about Shem. So that's why Shem is listed last, because he's going to be the main subject. So we quickly dealt with Yefes and Ham, and now we're going to list the children of Shem, and then talk about them and how Abraham came out of Shem and everything Abraham and his descendants did. And that's why the Torah says, the expression used by the Torah here is afhu. Shem also had children. It didn't say that in the case of Yefes or Ham. It says Shem also had children, because once we've already described all the children of Yefes and Ham, and we skipped Shem, made it sound like Shem didn't have any children. So here the Torah tells us, no, Shem also had children. He had the following children, and he's actually going to be the main subject of our story. So that's our verse 21. It says, Shem also had children in addition to his other brothers. And then it gives us 2 descriptions of who Shem was. He was, number 1, he was the father of all the children of Aver. Now, Aver is Shem's great-grandson. And here it's saying that he was the ancestor of all the children of Aver, his great-grandson, which seems superfluous. Why does the Torah have to tell us that? And what does it even mean? Why doesn't it say he was the ancestor of all the children of Arpachshad or Peleg or any of the descendants of Shem? It could have listed it. Here it lists specifically Aver, his great-grandson, and says that Shem was the father of all those people. Now, if you read through the Torah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because all of the people that believed in God throughout the Torah are referred to as descendants of Aver, Hebrews, Ivrim. So Aver was Shem's great-grandson, Abraham's ancestor, 6th-generation ancestor. But Avram is referred to as Ivri, a descendant of Aver. So all of the people that believed in God were referred to as Ivrim, which is Hebrews, people descended from Aver. And in fact, throughout the Torah, when we refer to the Jewish people, we refer to them as Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Yisrael, which is Yaakov. But when non-Jews refer to the Jewish people, they're referred to us as Hebrews. Non-Jews, I mean the non-Jews in Tanakh. So the Egyptians referred to the Jews as Hebrews, and they were unwilling to eat with the Hebrews because Hebrews ate sheep. When Jonah left the land of Israel and he went on a ship to Tarshish, and the people on the ship asked him who he was, he said, Ivri Anochi, I'm a Hebrew. That was the name given for Jews when non-Jews were part of the conversation. So we are Hebrews. We're descendants of Aver. Now here the Torah tells us, it's the Torah's audience is the Jewish people at the time of the giving of the Torah. And the Torah tells us, you've heard of the Hebrews, they're the people that believe in God. Their father, their spiritual father, is Shem. Shem is the ancestor of all the Hebrews, even though we're named after Aver, but Aver was the spiritual heir of Shem. So here we learn about the children of Shem, and the Torah tells us Shem was the father of all the Hebrews. Now, Shem and Aver were 4 generations apart, and the two of them together were 2 parts of a 10-generation ancestry of Abraham. So there's 10 generations between Noach and Abraham. Shem is the first, Aver is the 4th, Abraham's the 10th. We don't know much about the other 7. We know that Abraham's father was an idolater, as we just read in the Haggadah. We read about how our ancestors were idolaters, and it mentions specifically Terach, the father of Abraham. So he was an idolater. But the other 6, we don't know much about them. But Shem and Aver we do know about. Shem and Aver, we're told, well, Shem was a priest, right? Shem was the Torah says, Kohen Lekel Elyon. He was a Kohen. He worshipped God, our God. He lived in Jerusalem, in what eventually became Jerusalem. And he served God, the same God that we do. And he founded a yeshiva. He taught people about God. And Aver was his spiritual heir. The two of them together taught students. And the patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, were all students of that yeshiva. The yeshiva of Shem and Aver, who spread the word about the one God, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were their students. Now, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov went further than they did. They developed it further, and we're descended from them. We trace our ancestry to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, not to Shem and Aver. But Shem and Aver were the ones who kept the old traditions from before the flood, and they kept this idea of the one God, and they passed that on to future generations. So that's why the Torah here says that Aver is the Ivrim, the Hebrews, are the descendants of Aver. They're the ones that believe in God. But Shem is the father of all those people. That's how the Sforno understands our verse. An alternative explanation, Rashi and the Ramban both give a different explanation. That when it says Aver, it doesn't mean the person named Aver, who was Shem's great-grandson. It means, Aver means across. That's the literal meaning of the word. Across the river. Shem was the father of all the people that lived across the river Euphrates, on the east side of the Euphrates. So Israel's on the west. On the other side is where all the descendants of Shem lived. And Abraham himself, Abraham was born on the east side of the Euphrates. He crossed the river. When God told him to leave his land, he crossed the river and went to the land of Israel. The other description the Torah gives us for Shem is that he was the brother of Yefes. Now, Shem had 2 brothers. He had Yefes and he had Ham. But the Torah lists him as the brother of Yefes. He was not the brother of Ham. Because if we remember back to the story when Shem and Yefes honored their father by covering him when he was undressed, and Ham didn't. Ham made fun of his father and he joked about it to his brothers. So Ham was a very immoral person. Shem and Yefes were very good people, and Shem and Japheth were brothers. Ham was not, in that sense, on a moral sense, he was not a brother to Shem. Shem and Japheth were the two brothers. So now the Torah is going to list the sons of Shem. It's a bit late, but I'd like to get through these names so we can start with the next chapter next week. Take a few minutes. So in verse 22, it says, B'nai Shem, the sons of Shem, are Elam, Ve'ashur, Ve'arpachshad, Ve'lud, Ve'aram. 5 different sons. Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. A lot of these names are also familiar. We have Ashur, which is Assyria. Assyria was the first empire. It was 1,600 years later than the story we're reading. But the Assyrian Empire was the first world empire. Originally, they had kingdoms, individual kingdoms, but Assyria was the first nation that conquered many different kingdoms and combined it into one empire. And they were the ones that attacked the northern kingdom of Israel and exiled the 10 tribes. So that's Ashur mentioned here. Arpachshad, the third son mentioned here, is the ancestor of Abraham. Abraham is descended from Shem. The son that he comes from is Arpachshad. And then the fifth son mentioned here is Aram. Aram is also familiar. That's where Lavan lived. We call him Laban the Aramean. So Lavan lived in Aram. So Aram is one of the sons of Shem. And then in verse 23, Uvnei Aram, the sons of Aram, who is the fifth son of Shem. Utz, V'chul, V'geser, V'mash. Those are the 5 names. Utz, Chul, Geser, and Mash. I don't know much about the nations, but those are the 5 sons of Aram, who was the 5th son of Shem. And now the Torah is going to get to the main point. The main point of all these genealogies is Abraham. So the Torah now is going to list the ancestors of Abraham. So the son of Shem, the third son of Shem, was Arpachshad. In verse 24, it says, Ve'arpachshad yolad, Arpachshad fathered, es Shalach, that's one son. Ve'shelach yolad es Aver. Shelach was the father of Aver. So those are 3 generations. Shem, Arpachshad, 4. Shem, Arpachshad, Shelach, and Aver. Those are the 4 ancestors of Abraham. And then Ula Aver yulad shnei vanim. Aver had 2 sons. Shem ha'echad Peleg. The first son was Peleg. Peleg means split. And the reason he got that name is Ki biyamav niflaga haaretz. In his days, the land was split. We'll explain in a minute what that means. V'shem achiv Yoktan, and his brother was named Yoktan. Now Peleg is the one that's an ancestor of Abraham. So we have Shem, Arpachshad, Shelach, Aver, Peleg. 5 generations, and we're going to have another 5 before Abraham. Peleg is the 5th on this list. And the reason he's given this name is that in his days, the land was split. So what does that mean? 2 explanations for what that means. The reason that the explanation Rashi gives is that in the last year of Peleg's life was when they made the Tower of Babel. And that's when humanity got split into 70 nations and 70 different languages. So Niflaga haaretz means that in the days of Peleg, people split. The human race split into 70 parts with 70 different languages. The other explanation that's given, I found this explanation, could be that it's written in many places, but the place I saw it written is in Rashi, in Divrei Hayamim, in the book of Chronicles. There's a commentary referred to as Rashi. It's not written by Rashi, but it's erroneously attributed to Rashi. And that commentary on the parallel verse in Chronicles says that he was named Peleg because in his days the land was split. That means their lifespans were split in half. If you follow, we'll see in the next chapter, if you follow the lifespans of all these different generations, before the flood, everyone was living 800 or 900 years. After the flood, they were living closer to 400 years, or 430 years. From Peleg and on, it gets cut in half to closer to 200. So we've spoken about this in the past, how the generations were going to get successively shorter as a means of preventing bad people from having too much influence. So the original generations lived 800 or 900 years, and then it went down to closer to 400. But at this point, in Peleg's lifetime, it went down to 200 or 230. So that's two different explanations. One is that the land was split. People were split into 70 groups with different languages. And the other explanation is that the lifespans was split in half. The Sforno tells us that these two explanations are not in disagreement. They're saying the same thing. At the time of the flood, because people had started to become immoral, their lifespans had to be shortened. That's the result of immorality. At the time of the dispersion, when they built the Tower of Babel, they had to be shortened. So that's the result. When people become more immoral, their lifespans get shortened. So it's both. The land was split at that time. The people were split into many groups, but also their lifespans were shortened. Now, the next 7 verses are all names. I'm just going to read through them. Verse 26, V'yaktan. Yaktan is the other son of Aver, right? Aver was the ancestor of Abraham. He had 2 sons. He had Peleg, which we just discussed, and then the other son was Yaktan. So Yaktan Yalad, he fathered Es Almodad ve'es Shalef ve'es Chatzar Maves ve'es Yarach ve'es Hadoram ve'es Uzal ve'es Dikla ve'es Ova ve'es Avimael ve'es Sheva ve'es Ophir ve'es Chavila ve'es Yovav.
That's my son-in-law.
Okay. Ophir.
Ophir.
13 names. So the 13 sons of Yaktan. Kol ele b'nei Yaktan. These are all the sons of Yaktan. And yes, the name Ophir has become an Israeli name. I don't know why they picked this particular name, but it's a popular name. Vahi Moshavam Mimesha, these 13 descendants of Yaktan lived in a place, I don't know where this is, but they lived from Mesha, Boacha Sifara, Har HaKedem, from Mesha to Sifara, which is the mountain in the east. I don't know where that is. Ela v'nei Shem, these that we've just listed are the sons of Shem, Lemishpechosam l'shonasam ba'artzosam l'goyehem, according to their families and their languages and their lands and their nations, which is the same phrase that we use for Yefes and Cham. These are all the descendants of Shem. And then in verse 22, it just sums up the whole chapter, where we listed all the descendants of Noach, all the 70 nations. Ela mishpechos b'nei Noach, these are the families of the sons of Noach. L'soldo sam begoyehem, according to their all their children, according to their nations. Ume'ele nifredu hagoyim ba'aretz achar hamabul, and from these, the various nations split up in the land after the flood. So that's the end of that chapter. That goes through all the sons of Noach and their descendants. And then next week we'll start the chapter 11, which is about the Tower of Babel.